I am Lauren, 28, and literally last weekend, my role as the kid Aunt Vivian raised after my parents ditched me at 13. Yeah, it totally backfired. The inheritance I thought would honor her love for me, it blew up into a full-on family showdown at the lawyer's office for the will reading. My biological parents, absent for 15 years, showed up out of nowhere, demanding I hand over the estate and let them back into my life. When I pushed back, the room went dead silent. "You owe us this, Lauren," my mother yelled, with the lawyer and my aunt's old friends staring like I'd just set the room on fire. But here's the tea. Their nerve didn't break me, it lit a spark. I'm not just pushing back, I'm about to flip the script and change everything. A quick note. This story is copyrighted by the YouTube channel Guest Stories. Reposting, revoicing, or editing this content without permission constitutes copyright infringement. Thank you for respecting original creative work. Now back to the story. I sat in the stiff leather chair, the kind that creaks under you like it's judging your every move, in a conference room that smelled faintly of polished wood and stale coffee, my hands twisted together in my lap, fingers digging into my palms as I tried to steady my breathing. Aunt Vivian's will reading was supposed to be a formality, a moment to honor the woman who'd raised me after my parents decided at 13 that I wasn't worth their time. She'd been my rock, my home, my everything, teaching me how to bake her famous lemon bars, staying up late to quiz me for algebra tests, and always telling me I was enough. Now she was gone, and I was here to receive whatever she'd left behind, expecting maybe her old recipe books or the sapphire ring she always wore. I wasn't ready for what came next. The lawyer, Mr. Hargrove, adjusted his glasses, his fingers trembling slightly as he shuffled papers. I noticed his tie was crooked, a small detail that made him seem human, not just a suit delivering news. Across the table sat Vivian's closest friends. Mrs. Carter, who always brought over peach cobbler, and Mr. Ellison, who'd taught me to play chess on Vivian's porch. Their faces were soft with grief, but their eyes kept darting toward the door, like they knew something I didn't. My stomach churned. I'd spent the last month grieving alone, sorting through Vivian's things, finding her handwritten notes in the margins of books. Little reminders like, "Lauren, you're stronger than you know." I thought today would be closure, a way to carry her forward. Then the door swung open, and my heart stopped. In walked my biological parents, Ellen and Richard, looking like they'd stepped out of a time capsule. Ellen's hair was still dyed that unnatural blonde, though it was thinning now, and Richard's jaw was set in that same stubborn line I remembered from childhood. They hadn't aged well, but their audacity hadn't faded. They didn't even glance at me as they took seats at the far end of the table, Ellen smoothing her skirt like she belonged there, Richard cracking his knuckles in a way that made my skin crawl. I hadn't seen them since I was 13, when they'd left me with Vivian, claiming they needed space to find themselves. Space. For 15 years. "Lauren," Ellen said, her voice syrupy like she was greeting a long-lost friend. "It's so good to see you." I froze, my nails biting deeper into my palms. Good to see me? After they'd vanished without a call, a letter, nothing? I wanted to scream, but the room felt like it was shrinking, everyone's eyes on me. Mr. Hargrove cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable, and began reading the will. "To my beloved niece, Lauren, I leave the entirety of my estate," he said, his voice steady but loud in the silence, "including all properties, investments, and personal assets." Properties? Investments? My mind reeled. Vivian had lived simply, a small house, a beat-up car, her garden. I thought the estate was sentimental, not vast. I glanced at Ellen and Richard, and their faces had changed. Ellen's lips parted, Richard's eyes narrowed. They leaned forward like predators catching a scent. "That's significant," Richard said, his voice low, almost a growl. "We should talk, Lauren, as a family." Family. The word hit me like a slap. My throat tightened, and I gripped the armrests to keep from shaking. Mrs. Carter reached over, her warm hand squeezing mine, grounding me. I wanted to bolt, to run back to Vivian's house and lock the door, but I couldn't. Not yet. Hargrove kept reading, listing assets I couldn't process, land, stocks, a trust fund. My head spun. This wasn't just money, it was a legacy Vivian had built, and my parents wanted a piece of it. I could see it in their eyes, the greed flickering like a flame. They didn't want me, they wanted what Vivian had given me. I managed to nod at Hargrove, my voice stuck somewhere deep inside. "We'll need to discuss this privately," Ellen said, her smile tight like she was already planning her next move. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My mind was racing, piecing together fragments of Vivian's stories about them, how they'd always chased quick money, how they'd hurt her too. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew one thing. They weren't here for me. They were here for the estate, and I wasn't going to let them take it or me without a fight. As Mr. Hargrove droned on about the details of the estate, bank accounts I didn't know existed, a vacation home in the mountains that Vivian had never mentioned, my mind slipped away from the conference room, pulling me back into the past like a riptide. I stared at my hands, still clenched in my lap, the skin white around my knuckles, and suddenly I was 13 again, standing in the doorway of our old living room, the one with the faded floral wallpaper and the couch that sagged in the middle. Ellen was packing a suitcase, her movements sharp and hurried, stuffing clothes in without folding them. Richard stood by the window, arms crossed, his face turned away like he couldn't bear to look at me. "We're leaving, Lauren," Ellen had said, not even pausing as she zipped the bag. "You'll stay with Aunt Vivian for a while." A while. That was how she phrased it, like it was a weekend trip, not the abandonment it turned into. I remember the way my chest tightened, like someone had wrapped a band around it and pulled. I hovered there, my backpack from school still slung over one shoulder, homework spilling out because I'd run home excited to show them my science fair ribbon, first place for my project on solar energy. I'd built a tiny model with cardboard and foil, stayed up late wiring it, and the judge had called it innovative. But when I held it up that day, beaming, Ellen barely glanced over. "That's nice, honey," she muttered, her eyes on the suitcase. Richard didn't even turn around. He just grunted something about needing to load the car. No congratulations, no questions about how I'd done it. It was like I was invisible, a ghost in my own home. Later that night, after they'd driven off without a hug or a backward glance, I sat on Vivian's porch, the ribbon crumpled in my fist, tears hot on my cheeks. Vivian pulled me into her arms, her scent of lavender and fresh-baked bread wrapping around me. "You did amazing, sweetheart," she whispered, smoothing my hair. "I'm so proud. Let's frame that ribbon right now." That wasn't the only time. My mind jumped to when I was 10, at a family picnic in the park near our house, the one with the rickety swings and the pond where ducks begged for bread. Ellen and Richard had invited some neighbors, and everyone was fawning over my cousin Tommy, who was there visiting. He was 12, all gangly limbs and freckles, and he'd just won a spelling bee at his school. Richard clapped him on the back, laughing loud. "That's my nephew, smart as a whip." Ellen passed around photos of him on stage, her face glowing like she'd birthed him herself. I tugged at her sleeve, holding up my drawing, a detailed sketch of the pond with the ducks in colored pencil, something I'd spent hours on. "Look, Mom, I made this for you." She took it, glanced for a second, then set it aside on the picnic. "Cute, Lauren. But Tommy here spelled pneumonia without missing a beat. Can you believe it?" The neighbors cooed over Tommy, and I shrank back, my drawing fluttering in the breeze, ignored. That night I showed it to Vivian during her weekly visit. She gasped, her eyes wide. "This is beautiful. The details, the way you captured the light on the water, we're hanging this in the kitchen." And she did, right where everyone could see. I blinked, pulling myself back to the conference room, the air thick with tension. Ellen shifted in her seat, her foot tapping under the table, a nervous tick I remembered from childhood when she was impatient. Richard cleared his throat, his fingers drumming on the armrest. They hadn't changed. Even now they weren't here for me. Their eyes were on the papers Hargrove held, calculating. Another memory flooded in, my 16th birthday. Vivian had thrown a small party, just us and a few friends from school. She'd baked a cake, 3 layers with buttercream frosting, and surprised me with a used bike I'd been eyeing. I was thrilled, pedaling around the block, wind in my hair. But earlier that day I'd gotten a card in the mail from Ellen and Richard, postmarked from some city I'd never heard of. Inside, a generic happy birthday message, no personal note, and a $20 bill. No call, no visit. I stared at it, the hurt twisting like a knife. Vivian saw my face and hugged me tight. "They're missing out on you, Lauren. But I'm here, and I see how wonderful you are." She always did. Celebrating my straight A's with ice cream sundaes, cheering at my soccer games even when I sat the bench, listening for hours when I rambled about books I loved. In contrast, the rare times my parents did reach out before vanishing completely, it was always about them. A postcard from Richard when I was 14, boasting about his new job in sales, no questions about me. Ellen's occasional email, complaining about life, never asking how I was coping without them. They dismissed my life, my achievements, like they were footnotes. But Vivian? She collected them like treasures. My high school graduation photo framed on her mantle, my college acceptance letter taped to the fridge. "You're going places, kiddo," she'd say, her eyes shining. Sitting there in the lawyer's office, I felt that old ache resurface, but sharper now, mixed with anger. How dare they show up after all this, pretending to care? Hargrove paused in his reading, looking up. "There are also personal letters enclosed for Lauren," he said, sliding an envelope across the table. My name in Vivian's elegant script. I reached for it, my fingers brushing the paper, and Ellen leaned forward, her eyes hungry. "What's in there?" she asked, her voice too casual. I pulled back, clutching it to my chest. Not for them. This was Vivian's, mine. The flashbacks had reminded me, they'd always made me feel small, unseen. But Vivian had built me up, piece by piece. Whatever secrets she left, they were to protect me from this exact moment. I straightened in my chair, meeting their gazes for the first time. The room felt less suffocating now. I wasn't that invisible kid anymore. The envelope felt heavy in my hands, Vivian's script curling elegantly across the front, a final whisper from her. I sat there in the conference room, the air still humming with the shock of Ellen and Richard's arrival, their eyes boring into me like they could will the paper away. Hargrove had finished reading the will's main points, but he nodded toward the envelope. "Vivian left this for you to open in private, but given the circumstances..." He trailed off, glancing at my parents, who leaned forward slightly, Ellen's fingers twitching as if she wanted to snatch it. I didn't move right away. My thumb traced the seal, the wax embossed with Vivian's initial, a small V that she'd always pressed with care. This was her voice one last time, and I wasn't sharing it with them. I excused myself, murmuring something about needing a moment, and slipped into the adjoining office Hargrove pointed out. A small space with a desk, a lamp casting a warm glow, and a window overlooking the parking lot where their car sat, a shiny sedan that screamed recent upgrade. I shut the door, the click echoing in my ears, and sank into the chair, my knees weak. The envelope tore easily, the paper crisp under my fingers. Inside were several sheets, folded neatly, and a smaller packet clipped together. Old letters, photos, even bank statements yellowed with age. My breath caught as I unfolded the top page, Vivian's handwriting filling the lines, steady and familiar. "Dear Lauren," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I hope you found peace in that. But I know my sister and her husband too well. They'll come crawling back when they smell money. I've documented everything to protect you." My eyes stung, tears blurring the ink. She knew. Of course she did. Vivian had always seen through them. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, forcing myself to read on. She detailed their betrayals, starting small but building like a storm. First, a letter from when I was born, Ellen writing to Vivian, complaining about the burden of a baby, how Richard wanted to travel, unencumbered. "She's cute, but we weren't ready," Ellen had scrawled. Vivian had replied, offering help, but they'd ignored her until they needed money. Then came the photos. Grainy shots from the early 2000s, showing Ellen and Richard at parties, laughing with strangers, while I'd been home alone more nights than not. One image showed them in Vegas, arms around each other at a casino table, time-stamped just weeks after my 10th birthday, the one where Vivian had stepped in to bake the cake because they forgot. My fingers trembled as I turned the page. Bank statements followed, copies Vivian must have gotten somehow. Transfers from her account to theirs, loans they'd promised to repay but never did. "They borrowed for investments that vanished," Vivian wrote. "I covered your school fees when they wouldn't, lied to you about it so you wouldn't feel the sting." I paused, my chest heaving, and set the papers down for a second, staring at the wall. The lamp buzzed faintly, a reminder of the world outside this bubble. How had she kept all this? Vivian wasn't vindictive, she was protective, like a lioness guarding her cub. Another document caught my eye. A notarized statement from a family friend detailing how Richard had tried to sell off family heirlooms behind Vivian's back, including a necklace that belonged to our grandmother. He claimed it was for family needs, but it went to pay gambling debts, the statement read. Evidence, all of it, stacked like armor. Deeper in, Vivian's words turned personal. They abandoned you at 13 because Richard got a big opportunity overseas. A scam job that fell through. Ellen convinced him you'd be fine with me, that blood didn't matter if it inconvenienced them. My throat closed up, a sob escaping before I could stop it. I pressed my hand to my mouth, nails digging into my cheek, abandoned for a scam, I'd suspected, but seeing it in black and white, it burned. Vivian had included emails, printed out. Richard begging for more money after they left, promising to come back soon. Soon never came. Instead, radio silence, while Vivian rebuilt my world, enrolling me in school, attending parent-teacher nights, teaching me to drive in her old station wagon. I flipped to the last page, Vivian's final note. These are your weapons, Lauren. Use them if they try to manipulate you. They want the estate because they're broke, again. I've seen their patterns. But you're not them. You're mine, in heart if not blood. Choose love that stays, not blood that flees. Tears dripped onto the paper, smudging the ink slightly. I wiped them away, careful not to ruin her words. She'd built this safeguard over years, collecting scraps of truth to shield me. Micro moments flashed. Her pausing during dinner to jot notes, her filing cabinet always locked. I'd thought it was just her organized nature, but it was this, a fortress for me. Standing up, I paced the small room, the carpet muffling my steps. My reflection in the window showed puffy eyes but a set jaw. They were out there waiting, probably spinning tales to Hargrove about reconciliation. But now I had proof. Their greed, their neglect, documented meticulously. It wasn't just emotional ammo, it was legal too. Vivian had thought of everything, even including a clause in the will about contesting it, referencing these documents. I tucked the packet back into the envelope, sealing it with a press of my thumb. My hands steadied now, the shaking gone. This discovery wasn't breaking me, it was arming me. I took a deep breath, the air cooler now, and opened the door. The conference room voices hushed as I re-entered, Ellen's eyes snapping to the envelope. "Everything okay?" she asked, her tone laced with false concern, her fingers interlacing tightly on the table. Richard shifted, his chair creaking. I nodded, sliding back into my seat, the packet hidden in my lap. Hargrove looked relieved, ready to wrap up. But inside, a fire kindled. Vivian's secrets weren't just revelations, they were my shield against their storm, and I was ready to wield them. Hargrove set the will down with a soft thud, his fingers lingering on the edges as if reluctant to let go. The room seemed to exhale, the tension coiling tighter instead of releasing. I sat there, the envelope warm against my thigh, hidden beneath the table, its contents burning in my mind like a lit fuse. Ellen's eyes flicked to me again, her smile too wide, too practiced, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. They stayed cold, calculating. Richard uncrossed his arms, leaning forward slightly, his elbows on the table, making the wood creak under the pressure. Mrs. Carter shifted beside me, her hand brushing my arm in silent support, her rings cool against my skin. Mr. Ellison cleared his throat, breaking the silence first. Vivian was thorough, he said, his voice gravely from years of smoking cigars on her porch. She wanted Lauren taken care of. Taken care of. The words hung there, heavy. I nodded, but my mind was racing, piecing together the vastness of what Vivian had left. It wasn't just the house I'd grown up in with its creaky floors and the garden where we'd planted tulips every spring. Hargrove had listed properties. A cabin in the woods she'd mentioned once as a childhood retreat, but apparently owned outright, investments in stocks that had ballooned over decades. A trust fund seeded from her late husband's insurance, grown through careful, quiet decisions. Millions, he'd implied without saying the number aloud, his voice dropping low on the figures. My pulse thudded in my ears, a steady drum. How had she hidden this? Vivian, who clipped coupons and drove a 20-year-old car, had built an empire in the shadows, all for me. I felt a pang, sharp and sweet, gratitude mixed with sorrow that I couldn't thank her, couldn't ask why she'd kept it secret. Ellen broke in, her voice smooth as silk. "This is quite the surprise. Vivian never mentioned all this. She gestured vaguely at the papers, her nails painted a fresh red, tapping lightly on the table. I noticed the way her other hand clenched in her lap, knuckles whitening for a split second before relaxing. She was holding back, but barely. Richard nodded, his jaw working like he was chewing on words. We should discuss distribution. As her parents, Lauren, we have rights. Rights. The words slithered out, and I felt my stomach twist. I kept my face neutral, eyes on Hargrove, who adjusted his glasses again, a nervous habit. The will is clear, he said firmly, everything to Lauren, no provisions for others. I sensed the shift then, the air thickening like before a storm. This was the eve of it all, the moment before their full assault, before the turmoil Vivian had warned about erupted. My fingers itched to pull out the envelope, to lay her secrets bare right there, but I held back, savoring the anticipation, the power in waiting. Inside, thoughts swirled. What would they say next? Would they beg, threaten, play the victim? I imagined Ellen's tears, staged and glistening, Richard's bluster masking desperation. Vivian's words echoed. They're broke again. I could see it now, in the way Ellen's blouse was new, but her shoes scuffed, Richard's watch flashy but his cuffs frayed. They'd come sniffing, sensing the windfall, ready to claw it back under the guise of family. My breath came shallow, chest tight as I prepared emotionally, steeling myself like Vivian had taught me during tough times. Deep breaths, focus on facts, not feelings. I remembered her saying after a bad day at school when kids teased me about my Aunt Mom, feel it, then file it away. You've got strength they can't touch. I filed the hurt now, the old abandonment resurfacing like a wave, but I wrote it, anticipating the crash. The estate wasn't just money, it was Vivian's final act of love, a buffer against the world, against them. What would I do with it? Flashes came, fixing up her garden, maybe starting a scholarship for kids like me, abandoned and rebuilding. But first, survive this. Ellen leaned closer, her perfume cloying, the same floral scent from childhood that now made me nauseous. Lauren, honey, we need to talk. Privately, after this. Her eyes pleaded, but her posture was predatory, shoulders squared. Richard grunted agreement, his foot tapping under the table, sending vibrations I could feel. Hargrove glanced at his watch, signaling the end, but I knew it wasn't over. This was the precipice, the sensing of impending chaos. My heart raced, not with fear, but resolve. Vivian's legacy pulsed in my veins, her documented truths my anchor. They thought they could reclaim me, the inheritance. But I was ready, emotions armored, turmoil brewing, but mine to control. Mrs. Carter squeezed my hand again, her grip firm, a reminder I wasn't alone. Mr. Ellison nodded subtly, his eyes sharp. They knew Vivian's mind, her protections. As Hargrove gathered papers, rustling filling the quiet, I straightened, meeting Ellen's gaze directly for the first time. Her smile faltered, just a twitch at the corner. Good. Let them sense it too, the storm coming, but from me. The room felt smaller, charged, every micro-movement amplified. Richard's sigh, Ellen's swallow, my own steady breath. This inheritance had made me a millionaire overnight, but the real wealth was Vivian's foresight, preparing me for this exact turmoil. I was no longer the abandoned 13-year-old. I was her heir, in every sense. Hargrove stood, chair scraping back. We'll handle the paperwork soon, Lauren. Call if you need. He eyed my parents warily, then nodded to me. As everyone rose, the anticipation peaked. What would they do now? Corner me in the hall? Demand a meeting? I slipped the envelope into my bag, zipper loud in the hush, and stood, legs steady. The turmoil was here, but so was I, emotionally fortified, sensing every thread of their greed, ready to unravel it. As the chairs scraped back and everyone began to gather their things, the conference room felt like a pressure cooker about to blow. Hargrove tucked the will into his briefcase, the snap of the latch echoing sharply, while Mrs. Carter stood slowly, her hand lingering on my shoulder for an extra beat, her fingers pressing gently as if to say, "Hold steady." Mr. Ellison adjusted his coat, his eyes narrowing at Ellen and Richard, who hadn't moved from their seats. They sat there, like actors waiting for their cue. I slung my bag over my shoulder, the envelope inside a solid weight against my side, and turned toward the door, hoping to slip out before the inevitable. But Ellen's voice cut through the shuffle, sharp and insistent. "Lauren, wait, we need to speak with you. Now." I froze, my hand on the doorknob, the cool metal grounding me. The primary event unfolded right there, Their sudden, full-throated launch into manipulation, right in front of witnesses, as if the will reading hadn't just sealed my inheritance away from them. Richard stood first, his chair pushing back with a screech, his face flushing red like it did when he was building to a rant. "This isn't right," he said, his voice booming in the small space, pointing a finger at Hargrove. "Vivian had no authority to cut us out like this. We're her family. Your parents, Lauren. Blood. That estate should be shared." Shared. The word landed like a punch, and I turned slowly, meeting his gaze. His eyes were hard, veins bulging slightly in his neck, a tell from childhood when he'd argue with Vivian over money. Ellen rose beside him, her hands clasped in front of her like she was praying, but her posture was anything but humble. Shoulders back, chin up. "Honey, we've missed you so much," she said, her tone dripping with syrupy regret, stepping closer, her heels clicking on the tile. 15 years. We've regretted every day, but now with this tragedy, it's a chance to reconnect. As a family. You can't do this alone. The estate, it's overwhelming. Let us help. Help. I almost laughed, but it caught in my throat as a bitter choke. Mrs. Carter hovered near the door, her purse clutched tight, exchanging a glance with Mr. Ellison, who shook his head subtly. Hargrove paused in the doorway, briefcase in hand, his face neutral but his knuckles white on the handle. They were all watching. Unwilling spectators to this ambush. I felt exposed, the room's fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry bees. Ellen reached out, her hand hovering near my arm, fingers curling as if to touch me, but I stepped back instinctively, the movement small but firm. "Reconnect?" I echoed, my voice steadier than I felt, the envelope's secrets fueling me. "You show up after 15 years at her will reading, and suddenly want to be family?" Richard huffed, crossing his arms, his sleeves riding up to reveal a faded tattoo on his forearm, the same one he'd gotten on a whim during one of their adventures. "Look, kid, life's complicated. We were young, made mistakes, but parental rights don't vanish. We're here to claim what's ours, you, and what comes with it." Claim. Like I was property bundled with the estate. He leaned against the table, his weight making it tilt slightly, papers rustling. Ellen nodded vigorously, her earrings swaying. "Exactly. We've talked to a lawyer already. There are ways to contest this, but we don't want that. We want reconciliation. Imagine us together, managing the properties, the investments. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing." I clenched my jaw, teeth grinding, as their words washed over me in a barrage. This was it. Their manipulative claims in full swing, weaving guilt and greed into a net. Ellen's eyes welled up on cue, a single tear tracking down her cheek, which she dabbed with a tissue pulled from her purse. The motion rehearsed. "Think about what Vivian would want," she whispered, her voice cracking artfully. "She raised you, but we're your blood. She stole that time from us." Stole. The accusation twisted the knife, ignoring how they'd left me on her doorstep like an unwanted package. My fists balled at my sides, nails digging into palms, the pain sharpening my focus. Richard jumped in, his tone shifting to paternal, like he was lecturing a child. "You're 28 now, but still our daughter. Legally, we can petition for involvement, especially with this windfall. It's not just money, it's our legacy too. Vivian was my sister-in-law. She owed us." Owed. The entitlement dripped from him, his finger jabbing the air for emphasis. I glanced at Hargrove, who shook his head almost imperceptibly. No, they had no legal ground, but the threat hung there. Ellen stepped even closer, her perfume overwhelming, her hand finally landing on my sleeve, gripping lightly. "Please, Lauren, let's go somewhere private. Coffee? We can talk about the good times, rebuild." Good times? My mind flashed briefly to forced family dinners, their arguments echoing while I hid in my room, but I shoved it down. This moment was about enduring their assault, not retreating into the past. I shrugged off her touch, the fabric sliding under her fingers, and she recoiled slightly, surprise flickering in her eyes. "You abandoned me," I said quietly, the words hanging heavy. "No calls, no visits. Now this?" Richard's face hardened, his lips pressing into a thin line. "Abandoned? We left you in good hands. And look at you now, successful because of it. But gratitude goes both ways. We gave you life." The room fell silent, the only sound Hargrove's quiet sigh. Mrs. Carter finally spoke, her voice firm. "This isn't the place." But Ellen ignored her, focusing on me, her expression pleading. "We're sorry, truly. Let us make it right. Sign over partial control. We'll handle the finances. You can focus on whatever you do. Whatever I do. The dismissal stung, reducing my life to irrelevance. I felt the weight of their stares, the manipulation coiling around me like smoke, but Vivian's envelope burned in my bag, a counterweight. I took a breath, chest rising and falling, and met their eyes one by one. This barrage, the questions veiled as concern, the backhanded jabs at my independence, was meant to wear me down, but it only steeled me. No, I said simply, the word cutting through. Richard's eyebrows shot up, Ellen's mouth opening in shock. But I didn't elaborate, not yet. The event peaked there, their claims laid bare, and I turned, pushing the door open, the hallway air cooler on my face. They followed, voices rising, but I'd endured the gauntlet, emerging scarred but unbroken. The hallway outside the conference room stretched long and sterile, fluorescent lights humming overhead like a swarm of distant insects, casting harsh shadows on the beige walls. I quickened my pace, my heels echoing sharply against the linoleum, bag clutched tight to my side where Vivian's envelope nestled like a hidden blade. Behind me, their footsteps followed. Ellen's hurried clicks, Richard's heavier thuds, closing the gap before I could reach the elevator. "Lauren, stop," Ellen called, her voice pitching higher, laced with that faux desperation I'd heard in childhood when she'd wheedle for favors. I didn't stop, but they caught up anyway, Richard's hand shooting out to grab the elevator button just as I pressed it, his fingers brushing mine in a way that made me flinch back, skin crawling from the unwanted contact. The doors dinged open, but before I could step in, Ellen positioned herself in front of me, her body blocking the way, shoulders squared like a barrier. Richard flanked her, his arms crossing again, forming a human wall in the narrow corridor. Hargrove, Mrs. Carter, and Mr. Ellison lingered a few feet back, their presence a silent buffer, but this moment was ours. The escalation of their false reconciliation, a conversation that twisted from pleas to proclamations, right there in the echoing hall. "We mean it, Lauren," Ellen said, her eyes locking onto mine, pupils dilated in the bright light. "We're here to reclaim our rights as your parents. It's time to put the past behind us." Her hands gestured emphatically, palms up in a supplicating pose, but her fingers trembled slightly, betraying the calculation beneath. Reclaim. The word echoed in my head, a hammer strike. I stood there, elevator doors sliding shut behind her without me, the whoosh of air ruffling her hair. "What past?" I asked, my voice low but steady, forcing her to lean in closer, her perfume assaulting me again. Richard snorted, his lip curling in that familiar sneer. "The abandonment nonsense Vivian filled your head with. We didn't abandon you, we entrusted you to her. Temporarily. Life got in the way, but we're back now. Legally, we're still your guardians in spirit, and with this inheritance, it's our chance to guide you." Guide. I noticed how his eyes darted to my bag, as if he could see through the fabric to the wealth it represented, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed. Ellen's expression softened artificially, her brows knitting in rehearsed concern, one hand reaching out to hover near my shoulder again, fingers curling and uncurling like she debated touching me. "Honey, we've filed preliminary papers already, to re-establish parental rights. It's not about the money. It's about family. We've disowned our mistakes, the years we lost. Let us in, and we can share this burden. Vivian wouldn't want you alone." Disown their mistakes. The phrase hit like acid, burning through the thin veil of their act. They were rewriting history right in front of me, erasing the 15 years of silence, the birthdays ignored, the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, wondering why I wasn't enough. My chest tightened, breath coming in shallow pulls, but I held her gaze, watching the micro-shifts, the way her smile twitched at the edges, straining to hold. Richard nodded vigorously, his head bobbing like a puppet, stepping closer until I could see the pores on his nose, the faint stubble he'd missed shaving. "Exactly. We're renouncing that old narrative. No more abandonment. We were finding ourselves, building a life to come back to. Now, with Vivian gone, it's perfect timing. Sign a proxy or something. Let us manage the estate while we bond. Courts favor biological parents, you know." His voice dropped conspiratorially, as if sharing a secret, but his fists clenched at his sides, knuckles whitening, revealing the threat woven in. I backed up a step, my back brushing the wall, the cool surface seeping through my blouse. Hargrove cleared his throat from behind them, his voice cutting in. "That's not accurate, the will is ironclad." but they ignored him, focused on me, the conversation barreling forward like a train off the rails. Ellen pressed on, her tone turning wheedling, hands clasping together now, ringing slightly as if in prayer. Think about it, Lauren. We gave you life. That bond doesn't break. We've let go of the past, disowned the errors we made. Join us in that. We can be a family again, handle the finances together. You don't know how to manage millions. We do. Millions. There it was, the slip, her eyes gleaming for a fraction of a second before she masked it with another tear, dabbing at her eye with a knuckle. I felt a surge of anger, hot and clarifying, my fingers digging into the strap of my bag. They weren't reclaiming me, they were claiming the estate, dressing it up as redemption, disowning their abandonment. It was laughable if it didn't hurt so much. I shook my head slowly, the motion deliberate, watching Richard's face redden further, a vein pulsing in his temple. You disown your mistakes now because there's money involved. Where were you when I needed parents? My words came out measured, but inside, emotions roiled, hurt sharpening into resolve. Ellen's face crumpled theatrically, her lower lip quivering. That's unfair, we've changed. This is our olive branch. Accept it or we'll have to pursue legal avenues, for your own good. The threat landed, her voice hardening on the last words, fingers tightening in her clasp until her nails bit into her skin. Richard leaned in, his breath warm and stale on my face. Listen, kid, we're announcing it here. We're back, rights and all. No more hiding behind Vivian's skirts. Join us. Or step aside. Step aside. The ultimatum hung there, the conversation peaking in their bold proclamation, witnesses frozen around us. Mrs. Carter gasped softly, her hand covering her mouth, while Mr. Ellison muttered something under his breath. I straightened, pushing off the wall, my posture mirroring theirs now, unyielding. This was their escalation, announcing intent like conquerors, but it only exposed their greed, the false reconciliation cracking under pressure. The elevator dinged again, doors opening empty. I sidestepped them, slipping inside, my finger jabbing the close button. Ellen's hand shot out, palm slapping the doorframe to hold it. Lauren, please. Her eyes searched mine, desperate now, mask slipping, but I met her stare, unflinching. No. The door began to shut, her hand retracting at the last second, fingers curling back. As it closed, their faces, Ellen's pleading, Richard's furious, were the last thing I saw, the conversation's weight settling like lead. They'd announced their reclamation, disowning the truth of their abandonment, but in doing so they'd armed me further. The elevator descended and I exhaled, the envelope in my bag a reminder. Vivian had prepared me for exactly this. The elevator hummed downward, the numbers ticking by in red digital glow. 5, 4, 3, each one a small victory, distancing me from Ellen and Richard's grasping faces. I leaned against the cool metal wall, my back pressing into the handrail, the vibration traveling up my spine as I tried to steady my breathing, inhales sharp and ragged. My bag hung heavy on my shoulder, Vivian's envelope inside like a talisman, its edges poking through the fabric against my hip. Their words echoed in my head. Reclaim our rights, disowned our mistakes, twisting like barbs, the humiliation peaking in that hallway standoff, witnesses staring as they proclaimed their false redemption. Deepest low, right there, feeling small again, the abandoned kid cornered by ghosts. But as the doors slid open to the lobby, my phone buzzed in my pocket, insistent, pulling me back. I fished it out, screen lighting up with Hargrove's name, the lawyer's office number flashing. My thumb hovered over the answer button, hesitating for a split second. What now? More paperwork? Or had they already started hounding him? The lobby was quiet, marble floors gleaming under recessed lights, a receptionist typing away behind a desk, oblivious. I swiped to answer, pressing the phone to my ear, my free hand clenching into a fist at my side, nails biting skin. Lauren, it's Hargrove. His voice came through, steady but urgent, a hint of breathlessness, like he'd hurried to call. I didn't want to discuss this in the room with them there, but Vivian left specific instructions. The estate, it's larger than I outlined. Much larger. Larger. The word hung there and I stopped walking, planting my feet near a potted fern, its leaves brushing my calf. My heart skipped, a flutter in my chest as I glanced over my shoulder, no sign of Ellen or Richard yet, but the elevator dinged again upstairs, distant. What do you mean? I asked, my voice a whisper, throat dry. He paused, papers rustling on his end, like he was flipping through files. The trust fund alone is over 5 million invested wisely. Stocks in tech, real estate holdings. Then the properties, the house you know, but also a commercial building downtown, leased to businesses, generating 6 figures annually. And offshore accounts. Vivian was discreet, but it's all documented. Tax compliant. Total value, close to 12 million, Lauren, solely to you, no contingencies. 12 million. The number slammed into me, my knees buckling slightly, forcing me to lean against the fern's pot, ceramic cool under my palm. I blinked hard, staring at the floor's veined marble, tracing a line with my eyes to ground myself. Vivian, quiet, frugal Vivian, had built this? Images flashed, her clipping coupons at the kitchen table, mending clothes instead of buying new, always saying waste not. But now it clicked. Those investments she'd mentioned vaguely, the late nights at her desk with ledgers. She'd been safeguarding it all for me, a vast empire hidden in plain sight. Why didn't she tell me? I murmured, more to myself, my fingers tightening on the phone, knuckles aching. Hargrove sighed, a soft exhale through the line. She wanted to protect you from opportunists, like today. She amended the will last year, after hearing rumors your parents were in debt again, loans defaulted, house foreclosed. She included clauses. Any contest from them triggers a review of her documents, the ones in your envelope. It exposes their history, fraud attempts, abandonment filings she kept. It's airtight. Airtight. I straightened slowly, the humiliation from moments ago shifting, morphing into something empowering, a spark igniting in my core. The full extent revealed, not just money, but security, freedom, a legacy that dwarfed their petty claims. My breath evened out, deeper now, as I paced a small circle in the lobby, shoes scuffing softly. But there's more, Hargrove continued, his tone warming slightly, like he was delivering good news to a friend. Personal assets, art collection in storage, appraised at $500,000, paintings she bought cheap in the 80s now valuable, jewelry including a diamond set from her husband, and a letter of intent. She wants you to use part for charity, kids in foster care like you were. But it's your call. My call. The words settled, heavy and liberating. I stopped pacing, hand rising to my mouth, fingers pressing against my lips to stifle a laugh or a sob. I wasn't sure. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and sudden, one slipping down my cheek. I wiped it away with my sleeve, fabric rough on skin. Vivian had thought of everything, turning her quiet life into this fortress. The elevator dinged in the lobby now, doors opening, and there they were. Ellen and Richard stepping out, faces flushed from the rush down. Ellen spotted me first, her eyes narrowing, hand clutching her purse strap so tight the leather creased. Richard's jaw set, striding forward. "Lauren, we weren't done," he started, voice booming across the space, drawing the receptionist's glance. But Hargrove was still talking, oblivious. "I'll email the full breakdown tonight. Congratulations, Lauren. You're set for life." Set for life. I nodded, though he couldn't see, murmuring, "Thank you," before hanging up, phone slipping back into my pocket with a tremble. They approached, Ellen's heels clicking faster, Richard's fists loose at his sides but ready. The revelation pulsed in me, changing everything. The scale of Vivian's gift, not just financial but a shield, a weapon. My deepest humiliation in that hallway? It paled now, overshadowed by this truth. I met their eyes, posture shifting, shoulders back, chin up. The external event, this call, had flipped the script mid-descent, revealing the true vastness. 12 million, solely mine. Their demands seemed pathetic now, ants scrambling at a mountain. Ellen reached me first, hand outstretched again. "Listen, we can work this out." But I smiled faintly, the expression foreign on my face, as the weight lifted, replaced by clarity. Richard huffed, stopping beside her, his breath labored from the stairs perhaps. They'd avoided waiting for another elevator. "What's so funny?" he demanded, eyebrow arching. I didn't answer directly, the call's details mine to hold for now. Instead, I felt the shift internal. Humiliation evaporating, success's scale anchoring me. Vivian's legacy wasn't just the estate, it was this moment arming me against them. The lobby felt brighter, the air less oppressive. I stepped around them toward the exit, glass doors reflecting my determined stride. They followed, voices rising, but the revelation had changed the game. I was no longer cornered, I was empowered. The glass doors of the lobby loomed ahead, sunlight streaming through in slanted beams, casting long shadows across the marble floor that made my steps feel elongated, deliberate. Ellen and Richard were right behind me, their presence like a heat at my back. Ellen's hurried breaths, Richard's muttered curses under his breath, the scuff of his shoes as he tried to match my pace. "Lauren, don't walk away," Ellen said, her voice pitching up again, that wheedling tone from the hallway now laced with panic. Her hand reaching out to graze my elbow, fingers brushing fabric before I pulled away sharply, the contact sending a jolt up my arm. I didn't stop, pushing through the doors into the parking lot, the sudden warmth of the afternoon sun hitting my face, making me squint. The air smelled of exhaust and cut grass from a nearby median, grounding me as their scramble intensified. They burst out after me, Richard's face twisted in frustration, his tie loosened now, hanging crooked like his composure. "This is ridiculous," he barked, striding to block my path to my car, arms outstretched as if hurting me, his palms facing out, fingers splayed. Ellen flanked him again, her purse swinging wildly from the rush, hitting her hip with a thud. "We just want to talk, reasonably, about the estate, our rights." "Our rights." The hypocrisy dripped from her words. And with Hargrove's revelation still fresh, the 12 million, the airtight protections, I felt the calm settle over me like a cloak, cooling the earlier humiliation. This was the moment, exposing them, calmly, without rage, letting their own words and Vivian's truths do the work. I stopped a few feet from my car, keys already in hand, the metal warm from my pocket, digging into my palm as I gripped them. Turning to face them, I met their eyes. Ellen's wide and pleading, Richard's narrowed and stormy. The parking lot was mostly empty, a few cars glinting under the sun, distant traffic humming like white noise. No witnesses now, just us, but that made it purer, more direct. "You want to talk about rights?" I said, my voice even, almost conversational, watching Ellen's shoulders tense, her fingers twisting the purse strap until the leather creaked. "Fine, let's talk. You show up after 15 years, claiming reconciliation, but only because Vivian left me everything. Not a call before she died, not a visit, just this." Richard huffed, crossing his arms tightly, his biceps straining against his shirt sleeves, a vein in his forehead pulsing visibly. "That's not fair," we explained. "We were rebuilding our lives, now we're here, ready to be family again." Ready. I pulled the envelope from my bag slowly, the paper crinkling in the quiet, holding it up so they could see Vivian's script on the front. Their eyes locked on it, Ellen's lips parting slightly, Richard's jaw clenching with a click. "Vivian left me more than money," I continued, unfolding it deliberately, fingers steady now, no tremble. "She left proof, of everything." Ellen's face paled, her hand rising to her throat, fingers pressing into the skin there, leaving faint red marks. What do you mean?" she stammered, her voice cracking genuinely this time, the act slipping. I didn't rush, pulling out the first document, a bank statement copy, yellowed edges fluttering in the breeze. "Loans you took from her, never repaid. Thousands while I was eating cereal for dinner because you forgot to send child support." Richard's arms dropped, his hands balling into fists at his sides, knuckles whitening. "That's old history. She forgave that." The lie hung there, and I shook my head, voice still calm, watching his micro-reactions. The way his eyes darted away, avoiding mine, his weight shifting from foot to foot like he wanted to bolt. I flipped to the emails, holding them up, the printed text clear in the sunlight. "Emails begging for more money after you left me with her, promising to come back soon. That was 14 years ago." Ellen stepped back involuntarily, her heel catching on a crack in the asphalt, making her stumble slightly, hands shooting out to grab Richard's arm for balance. He shrugged her off roughly, his face reddening deeper. "Vivian twisted things. She always hated us." Hated. I almost smiled at the deflection but kept my expression neutral, pulling the notarized statement next. "A witness, your old friend, detailing how you tried to sell grandmother's necklace for gambling debts, while Vivian paid for my school clothes." The scramble hit then, their composure shattering. Ellen's tears came fast now, real ones, streaking her makeup, her hands waving in front of her as if to ward off the words. "Stop, Lauren, this isn't you. We're your parents." Parents. The hypocrisy peaked there, and I felt the satisfaction bloom, cool and precise. Richard exploded, his voice rising, finger jabbing toward the papers. "Those are lies. Fabricated to poison you against us. We disown that past. We're here for you now." I lowered the envelope, tucking it back safely, my movements measured, watching him sputter, spittle flying from his lips, landing on his chin unnoticed. "You're here for the money," I said simply, exposing the core. 12 million, give or take. Vivian knew you'd come, broke and desperate, house foreclosed, debts piling up. She documented that too. Their faces froze, Ellen's mouth opening and closing like a fish, no sound coming out, her hands dropping limp. Richard deflated, shoulders slumping, the bluster gone, replaced by a stunned silence, his eyes wide now, calculating the loss. How do you know that?" he whispered, voice hoarse, hand running through his hair, tugging strands. I didn't answer, letting the truth sink in, the hypocrisy laid bare, claiming family while chasing fortune, disowning abandonment only when it suited. The powerful exit built from there. I clicked my car unlock, the beep sharp in the quiet, and opened the door, sliding in without hurry, the leather seat warm under me. They stood there, scrambling verbally now, Ellen murmuring, "Wait, please!" Richard adding, "We can negotiate." But their bodies betrayed them, feet rooted, hands hanging useless. I started the engine, the hum vibrating through the wheel under my palms, and rolled down the window just enough. True family doesn't reclaim rights for cash, Vivian taught me that. Don't contact me again. Their stunned faces, Ellen's crumpled, Richard's ashen, filled the frame as I drove off, the parking lot shrinking in the rear view, their figures growing small, scrambling no more, just standing defeated. The road ahead blurred slightly from unshed tears, but they were relief, not pain. I'd exposed them calmly, the hypocrisy crumbling under Vivian's truths, my exit sealing it. No screams, no drama, just facts, leaving them in the dust of their own greed. The highway blurred past in streaks of green and gray, the sun dipping lower, painting the sky in oranges that reminded me of Vivian's kitchen curtains, the ones she'd sewn herself from thrift store fabric. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles still pale from the tension, but loosening now as the miles accumulated, putting physical distance between me and that parking lot confrontation. Their stunned faces lingered in my mind, Ellen's mascara-streaked cheeks, Richard's slack jaw, but the satisfaction of exposing their hypocrisy faded into a quieter ache, the kind that comes after a storm when you assess the damage. I'd left them there, scrambling in the dust, but the victory felt hollow without someone to share it with. My phone sat in the cup holder, screen dark, but I knew who to call, not for pity, but for the warmth that had always been my real anchor. I pulled off at the next exit, tires crunching over gravel as I navigated to a small cafe Vivian and I used to frequent, the one with the mismatched mugs and the best apple pie in town. It was tucked away on a side street, awning faded from years of sun, but the bell above the door still jingled the same welcoming tune. Inside, the air wrapped around me like a hug, scented with cinnamon and fresh coffee, the hum of quiet conversations, a balm after the day's chaos. I spotted them immediately at our usual corner booth. Sarah, my best friend since high school, with her wild curls tied back in a ponytail stirring sugar into her tea, and Mike, Vivian's neighbor who'd become like an uncle, his flannel shirt rolled up to his elbows, nursing a black coffee. They'd been Vivian's allies too, her chosen family, and now mine. I slid into the booth, the vinyl seat sighing under me, and they looked up, faces lighting with concern that shifted to relief. "Lauren," Sarah said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand, her fingers warm and steady, nails chipped from her gardening hobby, the one Vivian had encouraged, gifting her heirloom seeds. "We came as soon as Hargrove texted. What happened?" "You look wrung out." Her eyes searched mine, soft brown and full of that genuine care, no agenda hidden behind them. Mike nodded, his mustache twitching as he set down his mug with a gentle clunk, the steam curling up lazily. "He said your folks showed up, bold as brass, I'll bet." Folks. The word didn't sting like it used to. Here it felt detached, separate from the warmth enveloping me. I exhaled slowly, the breath I'd been holding since the lobby escaping in a rush, my shoulders dropping as I leaned back, the booth's wood creaking softly. The waitress swung by, an older woman with a kind smile who remembered Vivian, sliding a slice of pie in front of me without asking. "On the house, dear." I poked at it with my fork, the flaky crust giving way, steam rising with that familiar spice. "They did," I started, voice low at first, but gaining strength as I recounted the will reading. Their sudden appearance, the manipulative pleas escalating to demands, the hallway blockade where they proclaimed reclaiming rights while disowning their abandonment. Sarah's hand tightened on mine during the retelling, her thumb rubbing small circles on my knuckles, a silent, "I'm here." Mike's face darkened, his fist clenching on the table, veins standing out on his forearm, but he didn't interrupt, just listened. His presence solid like the oak table between us. When I got to Hargrove's call, the revelation of the estate's true scale, 12 million in assets, protections woven in, Sarah's eyes widened, her free hand flying to her mouth, fingers pressing against her lips. 12 million, Vivian? She was always so modest, but of course she'd build that for you. Her voice held awe, not envy, her posture leaning in closer, elbows on the table. Mike chuckled softly, a rumble in his chest, shaking his head. That woman was a force. Remember how she'd haggle at yard sales? Turns out she was investing smarter than any Wall Street hotshot. His eyes twinkled, but softened as he met mine. She saw you, Lauren. Not as blood, but as hers. That's why she prepared those documents, to shield you from their poison. The contrast hit me then, sharp and vivid, like stepping from shadow into light. Back at the lawyer's, the family dinner of sorts had been toxic, a barrage of contempt disguised as concern, backhanded claims on my life and legacy leaving me humiliated and cornered. But here in this booth it was the opposite, genuine warmth, no strings attached. Sarah pulled her hand back to gesture animatedly, her bracelet jangling softly. They're biological, sure, but true family? That's us. Vivian chose us all. Me for the late-night talks, Mike for fixing her fence every spring, and you? She chose you every day. Chose. The word resonated, erasing the biological pull Ellen and Richard had tried to wield. I nodded, fork halfway to my mouth, the pie's sweetness bursting on my tongue, a taste of comfort. Mike leaned forward, his calloused hands folding together on the table, knuckles scarred from years of carpentry, work he'd done pro bono for Vivian's house. I've known them since before you were born. Greedy then, greedy now. But Vivian? She documented it all because she knew they'd slither back. You're honoring her by standing firm. His voice was gruff, but his eyes held that paternal softness, the kind Richard never offered. Sarah chimed in, her curls bouncing as she nodded. Exactly. We're your allies, Lauren. Let's celebrate her legacy. Maybe use some of that estate to start the community garden she always talked about. The idea sparked something in me, a warmth spreading from my chest, loosening the last knots of tension. We talked for hours, the cafe emptying around us, the waitress refilling coffees without a word. Sarah shared a story of Vivian teaching her to knit, hands patient over tangled yarn. Mike recalled poker nights where Vivian bluffed her way to victory, laughing till tears came. Each anecdote affirmed it. Vivian's legacy wasn't just the money, but this. Chosen bonds, forged in love and consistency. My biological ties felt distant now, toxic remnants, while this moment pulsed with life. As the sun set, casting golden light through the window onto our faces, I felt grounded, the chaos contrasted by this haven. Sarah hugged me goodbye in the parking lot, her arms tight, whispering, "You're not alone." Mike clapped my shoulder, his grip firm. Driving home, the stars emerging, I carried their warmth, a shield stronger than any inheritance. The drive home under the emerging stars felt like a bridge between worlds, the toxic echoes of Ellen and Richard fading like taillights in the rear view, replaced by the lingering glow of Sarah and Mike's support, their words replaying in my mind like a soothing playlist. I pulled into Vivian's driveway, my driveway now, the gravel crunching under the tires, the house standing dark but familiar, its outline softened by moonlight filtering through the oak trees she'd planted decades ago. The key turned in the lock with a familiar click, and as I stepped inside, the scent of her lavender sachets hit me, a gentle reminder that this was my sanctuary. But as I flicked on the kitchen light, my phone buzzed on the counter where I'd set it, screen lighting up with a string of missed calls and texts. Ellen. Richard. The aftermath crashing in like a wave I hadn't fully anticipated. I sank into the worn armchair by the window, the one where Vivian used to read her mysteries, the fabric still indented from her shape. My fingers hovered over the screen, scrolling through the messages, Ellen starting with, "Please call, we need to talk," escalating to, "Don't shut us out, we're family," her words punctuated with crying emojis that felt manipulative even in text. Richard's were blunter. "This isn't over. We have rights." Rights again. My thumb trembled slightly as I deleted them one by one, the swipe motion deliberate, each one a small act of severance. But they kept coming, the phone vibrating in my hand like an insistent knock. This was the primary event unfolding, the persistent outreach in the quiet of my home, forcing me to establish boundaries, not in anger, but with firm, unyielding resolve. A voicemail notification popped up. Ellen's voice filling the room when I pressed play, tinny through the speaker. "Lauren, honey, we're sorry if we came on too strong, but think about it. We're your parents, we just want what's best. Call us back." Her tone was softer now, laced with that faux remorse, but I could hear the undercurrent, the greed not fully masked. I set the phone down, screen down, and paced the kitchen, floorboards creaking under my steps, the sound echoing my internal churn. How to handle this? Vivian's envelope sat on the table where I'd placed it, a stack of truths, waiting. But this wasn't about confrontation anymore, it was about fortification, building walls they couldn't breach. I sat at the table pulling a notepad from the drawer, the same one Vivian used for grocery lists, and began jotting notes, pen-scratching paper in the silence. First, block their numbers. Simple, but symbolic. My finger tapped the settings, confirming the block with a press, the phone going silent at last. Relief washed over me, shoulders dropping, but I knew it wasn't enough. They'd find other ways, emails, maybe showing up. Next, contact Hargrove. I dialed his after-hours line, the ringtone steady, and when he answered, his voice sleepy but alert, I laid it out. "They're texting nonstop. I need to set legal boundaries." He hummed thoughtfully, papers rustling faintly. "A cease and desist letter. We'll draft it tomorrow. Cite harassment, reference the will's protections. If they persist, restraining order." Restraining order. The words felt heavy but necessary, my nod invisible but firm. As we spoke, I traced the edge of the envelope with my free hand, fingers feeling the raised seal. Hargrove continued, "Include the documented history, abandonment, financial manipulations. It'll warn them off contesting." Yes. This was establishing rules. No contact without my initiation, no claims on the estate, violations met with legal force. I thanked him, hanging up, the phone warm in my palm. But the internal work deepened here in the quiet kitchen lit by a single bulb, shadows dancing on the walls from the swaying trees outside. Boundaries weren't just external, they were mental, emotional. I realized then, staring at Vivian's photo on the fridge, her smiling in the garden, dirt on her knees, that I'd let their reappearance crack my foundation, stirring old doubts about worthiness. Why did their greed hurt so much? My chest tightened, breath hitching as I admitted it internally. Part of me, buried deep, had hoped for genuine regret, not this farce. But Vivian's legacy demanded better. I flipped open the envelope again, rereading her note. "Choose love that stays, stays." They'd fled, she hadn't. This realization crystallized, a quiet epiphany amid the aftermath. My new rules started with self-protection, honoring her by not letting them erode me. No more second-guessing. The estate was mine to steward, not share with opportunists. The phone stayed silent now, blocked numbers doing their job, but an email pinged on my laptop across the room. I approached it warily, screen glowing as I opened the inbox. From Ellen. A long message pleading for one meeting, attached photos from my childhood. Me as a toddler, them smiling as if to guilt me. Manipulation in digital form. My fingers hovered over delete, but instead I forwarded it to Hargrove, adding, "Evidence for the letter." Then, delete. The action felt empowering, a micro-step in fortification. I drafted my own mental rules then. No responding emotionally. Channel energy into positive use of the inheritance. Perhaps funding therapy for abandoned kids, something Vivian would love. As the night deepened, clock ticking softly, I moved to the living room, curling up on the couch with a blanket Vivian had knitted, its yarn soft against my skin. The persistent outreach had forced this, handling the barrage by erecting barriers, legal and personal. Another text from an unknown number, likely them, buzzed, but I ignored it, focusing on breath, in, out, steady. This was my fortress now, rules clear, they don't get access. The realization settled deep, a foundation stone. Independence wasn't just financial, it was this, choosing who enters my life. By morning, Hargrove emailed the draft letter, words stark on the screen, "Cease all contact or face legal action." I approved it, finger clicking send, the whoosh sound final. The aftermath handled, boundaries set, I felt lighter, ready for what came next. No more scrambling on their terms, mine now, unbreachable. With the cease and desist letter sent, a digital barrier erected against Ellen and Richard's intrusions, the house felt quieter that morning. Sunlight filtering through the kitchen windows in golden shafts that danced across the countertop where Vivian's recipe books still stood open, as if waiting for her to return. I poured coffee into her favorite mug, the one with the chipped rim from that time we'd laughed too hard over a failed soufflé, and sat at the table, laptop humming to life. The inbox showed Hargrove's confirmation, letter delivered, no response yet from them. Relief settled in my bones, a subtle loosening of muscles I hadn't realized were tensed, my fingers drumming lightly on the mug's handle, steam curling up like whispers of possibility. But lightness brought clarity, and with it the weight of Vivian's legacy pressed gently, urging action. This wasn't just about protecting what she'd given, it was about honoring it, transforming the inheritance into something that reclaimed my sense of self, my family name, on terms defined by love, not blood or greed. The primary event unfolded there, in the quiet ritual of that morning, as I dove into planning how to use the estate's vast resources, $12 million of carefully built wealth, to create positive impact. A deliberate act of reclamation that shifted the narrative from abandonment to empowerment. I started small, opening the spreadsheet Hargrove had emailed, columns listing assets, the trust fund balances, property deeds, investment portfolios. My cursor hovered over the numbers, clicking to sort them, the screen refreshing with a soft whir. Vivian's handwriting echoed in my mind from her final note. Use it for good, Lauren. For those like you. Like me, abandoned. Rebuilding. My throat tightened, a quick swallow pushing down the emotion. As I pulled up a blank document, fingers poised over the keys. First, the house. Our house. It wasn't just brick and mortar, it was the heart of her legacy. I typed notes. Renovate the garden into a community space, install benches and paths for local kids to play, perhaps a small library nook with books on resilience. My pen, Vivian's old ballpoint, ink fading but reliable, scribbled margins, name it Vivian's Haven. Haven. The word felt right, my hand pressing harder on the paper, leaving indents. This would reclaim the family name. There was not as Ellen and Richard's tainted lineage of flight and fraud, but as Vivian's, synonymous with steadfastness. I imagined the sign at the gate, polished wood engraved with, in memory of Vivian Harlow, my last name, Harlow, tied to her, not them. Harlow had been their name too, but I'd make it mine, ours, a beacon of sacrifice over selfishness. Deeper into the planning, I researched online, mouse clicking through charity sites, tabs multiplying like ideas blooming. Foster care support. Vivian had navigated that world when she took me in formally after their abandonment. I found a local organization, fingers typing a query, grants for abandoned youth programs, results populated, and I emailed their director, words flowing, I'd like to fund scholarships for therapy and education in honor of my aunt. My enter key struck with purpose, the send whoosh echoing the letter to my parents, but this one carried creation, not closure. The amount? I debated internally, pacing to the window, looking out at the garden where weeds now encroached on her tulip beds. Start with $500,000, renewable. My reflection in the glass showed determined eyes, a set jaw. Reclaiming meant investing boldly, turning their attempted theft into communal gain. But reclamation went personal too. The family name Harlow had always carried their shadow, whispers in town about that couple who left their kid. I decided then, in a surge of realization, to legally affirm it as mine through action. Back at the laptop, I searched for nonprofit setup, fingers flying, articles on founding a foundation. The Vivian Harlow Foundation, I murmured aloud, voice testing the sound, lips curving slightly. It would focus on family redefined, workshops for chosen families, support groups for those rejected by blood ties, micro actions built, copying links, noting fees, my coffee cooling untouched as excitement warmed me instead. This wasn't revenge, it was redefinition, using success to etch a new legacy, one where Harlow meant healing. A call interrupted, Sarah, her voice bright through the speaker. Hey, checking in, how's the fortress holding? I laughed softly, the sound genuine, leaning back in the chair, its wood creaking familiarly. Solid. Actually, I'm planning something, using the money for good. A foundation, gardens, scholarships. She gasped, her enthusiasm spilling over. Yes, Vivian would love that. Let me help. I know grant writers. We talked details, her suggestions sharpening my vision. partner with schools, host events. Her words affirmed it, my nods invisible but fervent, hand gesturing as if she could see. This conversation, woven into the planning, deepened the event. Not solitary but collaborative, reclaiming with allies. As the morning stretched, I wired an initial donation, fingers hovering over confirm, heart pounding lightly before clicking. $100,000 to the Foster Org, anonymous but tied to Harlow Legacy Fund. The confirmation email pinged, screen glowing, and I printed it, paper warm from the printer, pinning it to the fridge beside Vivian's photo. Reclamation in print. But internally doubts flickered. Was this enough? My fingers traced the paper's edge, feeling the texture, as I confronted the old wound. Ellen and Richard's name still legally mine, but now I'd overshadow it. No more their daughter in shadow, Vivian's heir, impacting lives. By noon, plans solidified. Sell the commercial property downtown, funnel proceeds into endowments, keep the cabin for retreats for at-risk youth. Each decision, a keystroke or note, built the impact, positive, tangible. The family name, once a burden, now a tool for good, reclaimed on my terms. I stood, stretching arms overhead, muscles pulling satisfyingly. Outside, the garden waited. I grabbed gloves, kneeling in the dirt, hands pulling weeds, soil crumbling between fingers. This act mirrored the larger one, clearing space for growth, honoring Vivian by creating what she'd embodied, consistent love. The day waned, plans a stack on the table, my energy spent but renewed. Reclaiming wasn't instant, it was this, methodical, heartfelt, turning inheritance into influence. Harlow would mean strength now, not abandonment. As evening fell, shadows lengthening, I felt it settle. Legacy mine, positive impact, the path forward. The evening light faded completely as I stepped back from the garden, gloves dirt-streaked and tossed onto the porch railing, the earth still clinging to my knees where I'd knelt, pulling those stubborn weeds, each one yanked free with a satisfying rip that echoed the larger uprooting I'd done with Ellen and Richard's influence. My hands ached slightly from the effort, fingers flexing open and closed as I wiped them on my jeans, the fabric rough against my skin. Inside, the stack of plans on the kitchen table waited under the warm glow of the lamp, papers slightly curled at the edges from the humidity sneaking in through the open window. But as I sat down again, coffee reheated in the microwave with a soft beep, steam rising anew, a deeper quiet settled over me, not just the house's silence, but an internal one, prompting the final reflection that had been building since the will reading, since Hargrove's call. Since every micro-victory against their greed. I sipped the coffee slowly, the bitterness tempered by a splash of milk, letting the warmth spread through my chest as I stared at Vivian's photo on the fridge, her eyes crinkling in that perpetual smile, as if she were watching this moment unfold. The realization crept in gently at first, like dawn light filtering through curtains. My worth wasn't tied to the 12 million or the properties, or even the foundation I'd sketched out that day. It wasn't about proving anything to Ellen and Richard, whose faces now seemed distant shadows in my mind, their desperate scrambles in the parking lot reduced to a faded snapshot. No, this piece stemmed from something internal, a core truth Vivian had instilled over those 15 years of consistent presence. Showing up for soccer practices in the rain, her umbrella shielding us both, listening without judgment when I ranted about college stresses, her hand steady on mine, teaching me that love wasn't a transaction, but a daily choice. My fingers traced the rim of the mug, circling slowly, the ceramics smooth and familiar, as memories surfaced not in a rush but in soft waves. At 13, abandoned and raw, I'd questioned my value. Why wasn't I enough for them? Vivian never answered directly. Instead, she'd hand me a book, or a paintbrush, saying, "Your light shines from within, Lauren. Don't let anyone dim it." I'd rolled my eyes then, but now, in this solitary reflection, it clicked. Self-validation wasn't earned through inheritance or revenge, it was claimed by recognizing the love I'd received and given, the resilience forged in absence. Ellen and Richard's reappearance had tested that. Their manipulations like hooks trying to pull me back into doubt, but Vivian's documented secrets, her vast estate, had been tools to affirm what I already knew deep down. I was worthy because I existed, because I'd built a life of quiet strength, surrounded by chosen allies like Sarah and Mike. The clock ticked onward, its rhythm a gentle underscore to my thoughts, as I stood and wandered to the living room, sinking into the couch, blanket pulled over my legs, the yarn's texture soft against my calves. True peace, I realized, came from releasing the need for their approval, from understanding that blood didn't define family, actions did. Their greed-fueled reconciliation had exposed their emptiness, but it had also highlighted my fullness. The garden I'd turned into a haven, the scholarships that would lift others, the foundation bearing our name in honor, not obligation. My breath deepened, chest rising and falling evenly, the earlier tensions dissolving like mist in sunlight. This wasn't about flipping the script on them anymore. It was about authoring my own, page by page, with Vivian's legacy as the ink. A soft rain began outside, pattering against the window panes, each drop a tiny percussion adding to the serenity. I closed my eyes, head leaning back, the cushion molding to my shape, and let the reflection deepen. My worth was internal, a flame kindled by Vivian's sacrifices, fanned by my own choices to set boundaries to create impact. No longer the abandoned girl, but a woman at peace, embracing that true family was forged in love's consistency, not blood's fleeting ties. The rain intensified, a soothing white noise, washing away the last remnants of turmoil. In that moment, alone but not lonely, I found it. True peace, self-validated, unbreakable. The days following that reflection blurred into a rhythm of action and quiet contentment, the estate's management becoming less a burden and more a canvas for Vivian's vision. I hired a lawyer to oversee the foundation's setup, watching as the first checks cleared for foster programs, each one a step toward healing wounds like mine. Sarah and Mike became regulars again, our evenings filled with plans and laughter, the house alive with the family we'd chosen. Ellen and Richard faded entirely, no more outreach after the cease and desist, their silence a final admission of defeat. But it wasn't about them anymore. It was about the peace I'd claimed, internal and enduring. So what do you think? Did I honor Vivian's legacy enough? Or could I have done more to redefine family? Drop a comment below with your thoughts, and share if you've ever had to choose love over blood. It might inspire someone else. Remember, true worth comes from within, forged by the consistent acts that build us up. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of resilience and reclamation. You've got this. Keep choosing what stays.